별도 기동 미사일 연대는 9월 15일 새벽
I think deterrence is more stable in Korea than the North Koreans often tell us, right? The North Koreans, I think, like to talk as if war is around the corner. They do this pretty frequently. I don't actually think that's the case. If North Korea were to actually use a nuclear weapon, the retaliation would be extreme. If North Korea were to fight a conventional war, they would lose. So I actually think that deterrence here is pretty stable. The two Koreas have a pretty strong interest in not having an escalation spiral where things spin out of control. The North Koreans have a long history of saying outrageous stuff. So I think that things are actually pretty stable. There is a debate about the exercises, as you mentioned, right? I mean, there's this kind of chicken and egg debate where, like, on the one hand, people say, well, the exercises provoke the North Korean missile tests, and then people say, well, North Korean missile threats provoke the exercises. Sure. So the North Koreans are primarily concerned. The reason the North Koreans built nuclear weapons, their primary concern was to prevent something like what happened to Saddam Hussein. Their concern was a regime change attack by the Americans, the kind of thing that led to the removal of Milosevic in Yugoslavia, Gaddafi in Libya, Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And so they built nuclear weapons because they knew if they could strike the continental United States, that would deter the United States from attacking them. And they have been successful in that. I think North Korean nuclear weapons has made the United States more cautious in its Korea policy. I think it's so like 10, 12 years ago, I think it was possible the Americans would have bombed North Korea or something like that. Today, I think that's extremely unlikely because of the risks that we're talking about. So I think America's position today basically is to make sure that North Korea doesn't bully South Korea with nuclear weapons, right? I think the American position here primarily is to prevent North Korea or South Korea from being overrun or in some way dominated by North Korea or North Korea in concert with China. But I don't believe the United States has aggressive intent here. I mean, the North Koreans have nuclear weapons now. I mean, that makes it really, really dangerous to attack them in any way. Yeah, so we're still waiting to hear about like what exactly that means. It's worth pointing out that the North Koreans talk like this a lot, right? You know, every 6 months there's like a new missile we all have to learn about. I think that the critical issue is that the North Koreans really want two, I think, missile types, if you will, right? What they want, first of all, the big ones that can be launched around the planet and land on the United States. Those are very large weapons. Those are called intercontinental ballistic missiles. Those are similar to the rockets that are used in the space program, right? Because they fly so far and they carry a payload to the United States, and that's what keeps the United States from attacking North Korea, right? But they also want shorter range missiles, with which they can strike Japan, South Korea, Guam, arguably China as well. You know, that's sort of another issue, right? North Korea's relationship with China is not great. And so the North Koreans want short and medium range ballistic missiles that can strike their neighbors because they have pretty bad relations with their neighbors. It looks like that's what this weapon was. It was a shorter range weapon, presumably designed to hit Japan, right? I mean, we all know that there was an alert in Japan today, and that's probably what it's designed to do, is to strike Japan with a nuclear weapon. I think what's going on is the North Koreans are basically missilizing their military, which is to say that North Korea has a very, you know, we all know from the videos and stuff, North Korea has a big conventional military. You know, they roll the tanks through Kim Il-sung Square, and we all see that in the goose-stepping soldiers, and it looks really terrifying and everything else. But actually, it's not, because North Korea is pretty poor, right? North Korea doesn't have enough fuel to drive its vehicles. It doesn't have enough food to properly feed its soldiers. Conventionally, North Korea looks very fearsome and very large, but is probably pretty weak. And so the North Koreans have, because of that conventional weakness, the North Koreans have been betting very heavily on nuclear weapons and on missiles, right? And they got to test this stuff, right? And so I think that's what is going on. That's what all these tests are. That's what all the nuclear rhetoric is, right? It's because North Korea is moving away from a conventional military that really is just pretty out of date. It's designed basically to look like the Red Army from the 1970s, and that they would almost certainly be defeated. And so I think you're getting this missilization and nuclearization to compensate.
The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.